Block Artist Talk. This is Dave Benz. This is Dave Benz, and this is his marvelous walnut ink painting, so I'll hand it over to you.
Oh, wow, that was brief. Just pushed me off the cliff there.
Your reputation precedes you, Dave.
Oh, thank you. Let's see, so I had a couple of topics to talk about today, and the first one is that I had a milestone that I wanted to celebrate with this show, which is that I did my 100th painting for this show, which is pretty cool. Yay! And actually, I shouldn't say it's my 100th painting ever, but it's like of this, like I call these the Benz and Chang paintings because they're walnut ink and they're in a particular style. And so it's the 100th Benz and Chang painting. But it's still like by like far and away like the most sort of work I've ever done in a period of time, like any period of time. And I started doing them about 6 years ago. And maybe I'll tell the story about that. I had some friends who very kindly gifted me with some walnut ink. They gave me a bottle of walnut ink with the instructions to not drink it, little bottle. And I did find out eventually there was some alcohol in it, but probably not enough to get me lit or anything. And I just on a lark, one night I got invited to an arts event where everybody was going to sit down and draw or paint or do whatever, and I wanted to bring something along to do, and so I grabbed the bottle of walnut ink and some watercolor paper and just started playing around with it and just sort of fell in love with it immediately. And then so it's been about 6 years since I started doing this, and it's really been rewarding. Like I've found it to be really rewarding. And I'm always really glad to get to show in Guardino because it's a really great gallery. Let's see. I'm going to go through the couple of questions that pretty much everybody asks. The first one is always, who is Chang? Because usually I go as Benz and Chang, although it's not there now. And Chang is an imaginary photo studio partner for me. Because when I started doing this, I wanted to make like fake vintage photos, like that was my thing. And there's actually a funny story I'm gonna have to remember to tell after this about it. But I wanted to have the experience of like you're in a secondhand shop or whatever, and you're going through some of the like the Goodwills, and you're going through the secondhand sort of art, and you find this really weird thing that's actually a photo. In my case, they're paintings, but I want them to look like photos, like weird vintage photos. So yeah, and one of the things that a lot of the vintage photo places, like a lot of the photo places had then were partners. There's like the famous one is Underwood and Underwood. So I wanted one, and I have a stuffed animal. It's actually a stuffed cat that I called Mr. Chang because he's made in China, and so he became my photography partner. So he's fictional. There isn't a Chang. And so, well, there is, but he's a good guy too, Chang. He adds the dark. A lot of the dark is from him. The next sort of question I get asked a lot is about the walnut ink. And I used to get walnut ink from a place that's like 2 or 3 blocks down this way, Monograph Bookworks. It's either Monograph, I think it's Monograph Bookworks. And just recently they stopped making it, or they ran out or something. And he said they used to do it every year, and the last time I went to go get some, he was like, oh, we haven't actually done this year's batch yet. And so I ended up needing to learn how to do it myself. And it's pretty easy. You just get the husks as they fall out of the tree, the walnut husks as they fall. I made infographics for this show that are in the window, the husks that fall out of the tree that turn your hands brown when you pick them up. A lot of people, I guess, have childhood memories of their hands turning brown for weeks. They look like this. I love this photo especially because there's little walnut maggots in there. They're really called walnut maggots because they eat the walnut husks. And then you go ahead and you soak them in some water till they look like this. And then like weeks or months. And then this doesn't usually get the ink dark enough. You usually have to put it into a pot and cook it down so that the ink is darker. And you actually want to cook it down a little bit darker than you want to paint with or draw with, because you're going to put some alcohol in it. And the alcohol is supposed to be to keep the mold down, but I've found it also affects how the ink flows. And so artists who've worked with ink, they'll know, or watercolors do this too, that there's what's called bloom, where you put down a wash, and as it's sort of evaporating, the ink or the pigment actually flows to the edges. Adding alcohol to it makes it so that it doesn't flow to the edges as much. So you don't end up with as hard an edge, which is good for me because I'm trying to imitate photos, and hard edges aren't really good for that. So I put some booze in it. Absolute vodka. That's what's in my current batch is Absolute vodka. And so that's that question. A lot of people question whether it's light fast or not. And if you Google it, you'll find there's some guy, I think he's in Minnesota, who did a test where he put some out in the sun for like a year and covered part and left other parts exposed. And when he took it off, there was some noticeable fading, but like not anything really fatal. So I tend to tell people, like, treat it like you would a watercolor, which is you're not really supposed to put it in the sun, but it's not like a fugitive pigment. And then what else? I should probably just tell the story. I'm going to hand out a couple of photos here that are reference material, because that's another thing that I get asked a lot about. And so this is one of the reference pieces that I used for that painting there. I'll just hand them around. And then this one, which is in kind of eye strain vision, is a reference piece that I used for the three ladies there. And I'll pass that around. Just pass them around and have a look. I do, Jill McVarish and I talk about this. We call it Frankensteining, which is that, you take pieces from a lot of different references and sort of mash them together. So like a body from here, a head from there, and whatever. And just sort of put it together.
Jill McVarish is an artist that lives in Astoria that also runs the McVarish Gallery.
Oh, yeah. And then I'm showing with her in October at Riversea Gallery in Astoria. And I love Jill McVarish. I love her paintings, and I like her as a person too. So let's see. The other thing I wanted to tell you guys was a story, because I did have this thing happen where somebody found one of my paintings in a secondhand store. Yeah, and they were actually looking for frames, and they found my painting, and they were like, "Oh, this is so cool!" And they bought it. I think they got it for like $15. I'm pretty sure it was $15. And at first I was like, $15? I was all insulted. There's actually kind of a story behind it, but I'm not going to go into it because it's really long. But I was telling my girlfriend about it, and she was all like, "Oh, it's finally come full circle. You wanted to be doing the paintings where it's like somebody's going through a secondhand store and they stumble across like this weird photo kind of thing, and you did it. You actually created that experience for somebody, and I was really I was kind of proud and excited about that. Yeah, I did it. I didn't even have to go plant them or anything, Not that I would, but I was really excited about that.
When that paused for all the goodwills and all of us artists that found out about that we were all rushing to...
Oh, really? You were all like, there's got to be more now. Well, I actually kind of know the story of that painting, and it was destined to go, it's at some point I was like, I wonder what's going to happen to this painting, because there's a whole kind of story. I don't want to get into it, but there's a story about the painting. That's interesting. Let's see, what else can I talk about? I think that's probably it, and I'll open it up to questions. I do want to say coming up, like I do have a show in Astoria. I don't know if it's kosher for me to talk about that, but come on out. And also I'm on Instagram, and just follow me. I'm Benz and Chang there. And so I'll open it up to questions now.
I was just curious on, so is it similar to watercolor, like it has a certain transparency, I guess, the ink, rather than like a gouache, say, or something?
Yeah, it's very transparent.
And so your layer, it looks like when I'm watching the samples, like to get the dark, you have to really layer it up.
Yeah, one of the things that I do is that I actually keep like 3 pans going at the same time, and they're contact storage cases, and I keep them dark to light. So the one on the bottom is the darkest, and the one on the top is the lightest. And I kind of nurse them along so that I always have like a pretty good supply. And then like, you know, I might add more ink to one or another of them to keep it going. But the nice thing about that is then I don't have to layer so much. I can work a lot faster. Whereas when I started, I was taking straight from the bottle and diluting maybe. And to get a good dark, like is what's in them there, I'd have to go over it like 10 times or something. So, but yeah, I do a lot of layers too.
And then you made it like in different, like lighter, like a little less dark ink. It sounds like you have like different variations.
Yeah, I have one that's almost always like really light, and then like sometimes to get a really good photorealistic kind of thing, like I'll actually I'll have a water bottle that I sort of like dip my brush into a lot, and it'll get to a certain shade that's just south of like clear, and I use it in parts like this where I want to have some depth in it, because your eye actually does pick that up. If you get a really large, at least it's been my experience, if there's a really large block of white in a painting, it keeps it from looking photographic. That's probably more answer than you needed.
No, I was interested.
Yeah, it's a good question.
Your work often has I often see sort of a sense of the sort of otherworldly, spiritual world, sort of.
Yeah.
You know, it's like I'm walking into a seance or something.
Thank you.
You know, can you talk about that a little bit? Or?
Yeah, it's something that I'm really interested in from many different directions. I find that era of time really fascinating, like the spiritualist kind of era, not just because they were all like, oh, you know, ghosts and that kind of stuff, but also like charlatans and these real characters, like, and the history behind it is really fascinating to me, like the whole, everything about it. And I don't know, I always feel kind of creepy saying this, like I'm like the little kid who says, I see dead people, but I am kind of like sensitive to that kind of stuff, and I've had a bunch of experiences in my life where I had a time where I was staying in a hotel room that was haunted, and it was super creepy. That's the funny thing about ghosts, is there's a lot of people that really want to encounter, and I'm like, trust me, if you ever are in the same room with a ghost, like that's the last place you're gonna want to be. You want to be somewhere, at least I do. So I had a friend who was telling me about how she used to live in a house where at night something would come and touch her feet while she was sleeping. They had a ghost that would touch her feet, and I was like, how long did you live there? She was like, I don't know, we moved about 5 years later. I was glad to get out of there. I was like, 5 years? I'd be like, it's gonna murder me next. I don't like it. No, it's a bad experience. So, yeah.
Can you tell us the story? So you showed us a picture, and that sort of got you going. Can you tell us how your photo evolved around that picture? Like,
Yeah.
did you dream it up? Did you see something else that inspired the background? Or?
You know what happened to me? So if you look, a lot of these paintings are actually pretty, like this one's about me discovering that Japan was gonna start whaling again and being really upset about it. This one to me is about sort of like how we have this endless war and we're still sleeping through it somehow. Kind of like we're still like our days are completely normal. And yet there's people somewhere like in a war that we're in. And so I realized that a lot of my like material in the show was pretty dark and brooding. And I would say maybe it was 3 weeks ago. It was pretty recently. Grumpy Cat died.
Yeah.
The internet cat. And I read an article about it that was sort of like a eulogy to Grumpy Cat, and they were saying like, do you remember like the 2000s and how the internet was like this friendly place and people were pretty happy and things could be funny on the internet, and now it's all like filled with Nazis and like wackos and trolls and stuff. And I was like, God, I'm just being I don't know, I'm not lighthearted enough right now. So I had sort of planned to make this kind of a darker painting, and at some point I was like, no, I'm just gonna do like it's a little bit like Les Vampires. There's a French serial that I don't know how to pronounce the name of the director, but I want to say it's Louis Fillade or Falloud, whatever. He did a scene with a lady in sort of a vampire bat kind of like outfit, just like that, with a cape, and she's kind of menacing somebody on a park bench. And so I stole the outfit, and then I put sort of two like Edward Gorey-esque like femme fatales on either side of her, looking kind of like looking sideways. And there was a boat in the original photo that they were standing in front of, and I really liked. I love the sort of reference of a boat being like you're taking a journey, you're traveling somewhere, and so I liked having the boat there as sort of a symbolic sort of thing that's behind, like they're going to take you for a ride, kind of maybe like we're here with the boat. And we're taking you somewhere. That was kind of what I was thinking about. But I wanted to be more lighthearted. And like I love that painting now. I just adore it.
Which one?
It's the one with the three ladies here.
Oh, yes. So I'm guessing on the frames it looks like you collect like obscure frames?
I do. That's part of the wanting to like, but I do. I have to go around to, and I have a lot of friends luckily now who tip me off to where frames are, but I have to go to vintage shops and Goodwills and all kinds of places to find frames.
Better glass, I'm guessing.
Not necessarily. Like that one there, I mean, to my eye, it really stands out. That one's got an original piece of glass in it.
Okay.
And if you compare the color of the mat to the color of the mat that's 2 doors down, you'll see it's bluer, like a bluer greener, and that's because that's an original piece of glass in there. It's also got a bunch of the flaws that you'll see. It's got wavy. It's a little bit wavy. It's got like a wavy, and it's got some flaws in it that you'll get from real vintage glass, and I just love it.
Seems like it would be appropriate.
Yeah, when I can use the vintage stuff, I do. But most of these have new glass, and the bigger ones I'm starting to switch over to putting acrylic in. So they're not as heavy, and they can be shipped without having to worry about breaking them.
Do you ever ask the artist to do a thing of them, a picture of them or their dog or anything like that? Or do you just come with all of this?
Oh, I just come with it. Yeah. I've had a few people ask me to do commissions, and I've done one. Usually somebody approaches me to do a commission, and we'll get through part of the conversation, and then it just doesn't happen. So I'm open to doing commissions, so I like doing them, finding out what people's ideas are and working with that.
What painting subject matter is coming up that you're excited about painting?
Oh, right now?
Yeah.
I don't know. Well, so I'm working on actually I'm going to have a show here in September with Karen Whippick and Nanette Wallace, and it's going to be those two and then me, and we're doing Exquisite Corpses, which if you know, it's like it's a way of like well, you fold a piece of paper up in threes and then you pass it around, and the one person draws something and then they just leave marks for the next person where they should start, and then folds it over so they can't see. So you have sort of a place to start, but you don't see the whole thing until the end where you unfold it. And it's a sort of surrealist game. That's what it's famous for. And so the three of us are doing that, where we're doing like a painting and just passing along the edge to the next person. And I'm really excited about doing that.
What's that called?
It's called an exquisite corpse.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, the body is divided into three parts, so they know where the neck is. They know the neck is there, and then this is where the neck stops and starts, or
Yeah,
where
the legs.
start. And so each artist is in charge of 1/3 of the body, but they don't know what the other artist did. They only know that they're doing the legs.
Yeah.
So it's a figure for sure, and then.
Yeah, it's usually I mean, once people really get into it, they start putting pipes and mermaid tails and all kinds of crazy stuff in there. And that's pretty much anything's fair game. So yeah, I'm really excited about it. I was going to start one of those today when I get home from this. I'm pretty excited about it. But then other than that, I love doing these paintings. I really like doing them. So probably more of the same.
What's the fascination with floorboards?
Oh, with the floorboards? So I almost didn't put any floorboards in this one. Part of it is just to create depth. Like I just end up feeling like it helps to set a stage and create depth. And I also use it a lot to point at whatever I want the eye to go to. Like in this case, all the floorboards in this one point to the center of the skeleton. I mean, and I had the debate with myself, do I have the floorboards point to the lady's face, or do I do it to the skeleton? Like I do that. So that's another reason why I use the floorboards, is as a guiding the eye somewhere kind of device.
Something I really love about your work is the eyes. How do you get soul out of these two-dimensional characters? Because there really is that's the first thing I noticed was every single one I would sort of focus on obviously the photorealism makes sense now because I didn't know that before that was kind of the thing. But yeah, how do you coax that kind of soul and life from the eyes of these things? Because they really step out to me.
Oh, thank you. That's a great compliment. I don't know. I just keep working at it until they're right.
Because
I do.
It's just little dots of ink. It's not, it doesn't look like an eyeball. But
Yeah.
I feel the person behind it.
Oh, thank you.
Connecting to me. And
Thank you.
I'm just always fascinated by that.
Yeah.
So.
Sometimes it's totally I'll just go, and it's right. And then other times it's no. And you can, with the walnut ink, it's nice because you can lift, like you can with watercolors. And so I'll lift to try and get the eyes right. And then I have a funny thing where my face, you can barely tell, but one of my eyes is higher than the other. And so I always have to not do that to the people I'm painting. Because I will. If I don't pay attention to it, everybody's got one eye higher than the other. It's pretty weird. Now you're all looking at my eyes and it's really weird. That's good.
Do you ever add white? Do you ever
No.
go back and
No, if I get to the point where I'm oh, I really need to, I'll scratch. I have a scratchboard scratcher, one of the dull kind, and I'll scratch off. Or I have to figure out something else. So, and I've had paintings where I'm oh, I should have put something really big and white right here. Oh, darn. All right, I'll figure something else out. So, but yeah, I feel when you look at a photo, that's one of the things about a photo is that the surface has got this uniformity about it, and the very second I put some kind of white anything on, and I've tried on these, it just bam ruins it immediately for me. like just ruins the illusion of it being a photo.
Probably the white's too bright too, because even you don't really have like a white, like if you're using the paper as white, it's still probably not as bright as a white.
No, yeah, because it's watercolor paper, so it's a little warm. Yeah, it's true.
I just wanted to say that I really think that one of the strengths of your work is that even though you say, this is what this one was about for me, you know, for you.
Yeah.
They're almost, I want to say they're never, but almost never, like blatantly about that. There's enough information there that someone can bring their own experience to it. And
Thank you.
you know, that's totally okay. And I think that's fabulous when that happens. It means
Yeah.
something for you.
I like
can
that.
Look at it means something different for me.
Yeah.
And I have noticed on Instagram that people push you a lot about what is this about. And you'll be vague, like, well, this is new, I'm not really sure. But really, you have to think of something. You know, I mean, they push you about it.
Yeah.
And,
Oh, that's
but I
interesting.
think that's a strength.
Oh, thank you.
That was me.
Thank you.
Was it?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah, yeah.
Someone else replied that had to explain to me like, artists don't always know, and I'm just like,
Yeah, she got a lecture from that.
I'm his girlfriend. I can push him.
Yeah, totally. But yeah, thank you. I do like, I like that myself.
Anybody any other questions? And we'll move in.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you
Thank
very
you very much.
Because it came up because we were talking about